Under the orders I signed today, we will also be designating the cartels as foreign terrorist organizations.
Today we are announcing a historic indictment. This case involves 33 defendants. It's a massive drug trafficking conspiracy spanning nearly a decade, involving tremendous volumes of fentanyl and narcotics.
From Mexico's toll roads to Spain's coastal highways, cartel queens have fallen to ambushes planned down to the second. But this time, the hunt ended far from the tropics.
Police! A little farther, bro. A little more. Okay, good, you're good, you're good. We're good. Step back forward. We're up.
In the heart of Chicago, the FBI launched a strike that shocked the underworld, capturing a narco queen, seizing more than $200 million in drugs and uncovering 10 tons of weapons.
The gun didn't come back stolen. We did continue to test a lot of the stuff that we were locating. At this point, she's going to go to jail for the possession of heroin, the UCW, which is unlawful carrying of a weapon.
What happened inside that raid didn't just end an empire. It changed the way the world hunts cartel royalty. Highway takedown of Dona Lety. Under the bright sun on a weekday afternoon, the toll road between Orizaba and Cordoba looked ordinary. Steady traffic, long-haul trucks humming by, and the occasional police cruiser sitting back in the shade of a merge lane. Nobody watching would have guessed what was about to unfold. Hidden in that slow rhythm of cars was a small team from Mexico's federal police and the Navy. They weren't there to pull anyone over for speeding. They were waiting for one car, one woman. Her name was Leticia Rodriguez Lara, but in the streets she was known as Dona Lety, or simply La Cuarenta. For months her name had echoed through Cancun and Playa del Carmen. Every time gunfire broke out near a club or hotel, her name surfaced in the reports. She had turned the glittering Riviera Maya, a place tourists knew for beaches and cocktails, into a battleground. The commanders planning this mission knew she rarely left her base in Quintana Roo. That's why they wanted her on the highway, far from her bodyguards, far from the crowds, far from the noise. The road would be the trap. She wasn't just any target. Years earlier, Leticia had worn a badge. She served in the old federal judicial police, chasing criminals before deciding to become one. Step by step, she crossed over, building her own network, first as a middle link, then as a boss. She worked with bigger traffickers, learned the routes, the codes, the habits of patrols. She knew how the system moved because she had once been inside it. When she finally broke away to run her own crew, she took that knowledge with her and used it to carve out control of Cancun's street-level drug market. That background made her both powerful and dangerous. By the summer of 2017, investigators had followed her trail long enough. They believed she was moving between safe houses and stash points, using highways that cut across central Mexico. If they caught her there, they could avoid a city gunfight. So they waited for her to take the Orizaba-Cordoba toll road. That stretch runs through rolling hills dotted with gas stations and rest stops. On maps, it's just another line of asphalt, but to the officers that day, it was the perfect hunting ground. It was Wednesday, August 9th, somewhere near the 135-mile mark, recorded officially as kilometer 217.6. The convoy spotted her car. Federal agents in unmarked vehicles settled in behind, keeping distance but never losing sight. Marked units were staged farther ahead, waiting for the signal. They called it a box, and that's exactly what it was. close the lanes, trap the target, keep everyone safe. When the lead unit gave the go-ahead, everything happened fast. Patrol cars pulled in from both sides, lights flashing. Doors flew open, weapons pointed low. Officers moved like a wedge, one team controlling the driver, another clearing the passenger seat. In less than a minute, it was over. No crash, no chase, no shots fired. Every search that followed had to be by the book. They started with the people, then the car. In the trunk and under the seats, they found what they were looking for. Packages of methamphetamine and military-grade firearms. In Mexico, some weapons are reserved strictly for the armed forces. Civilians caught with them face heavy penalties. The presence of those guns alongside the bagged meth was no accident. It showed intent to move product, not just to use it. 2 clean charges in one stop, drug transport and restricted weapons. For prosecutors, that was gold. And for everyone watching, it shattered a myth. Big bosses aren't always surrounded by fleets of armored trucks. Sometimes they ride light, carrying their power in a small car loaded with enough evidence to bring them down. When they asked for identification, the woman didn't fight it. She was Leticia Rodriguez Lara. Another person in the car was detained too. Both were handed to federal authorities in Puebla, where prosecutors had already opened a file under the Specialized Unit Against Health Crimes. Within hours, a control judge reviewed the arrest, ruled it legal, and ordered preventive detention. That meant she would stay behind bars while the case unfolded. Investigators had 4 months to wrap up their work. Word spread quickly back in Cancun. By sunset, state officials were on television announcing more patrols across all 11 municipalities of Quintana Roo. Joint forces of state, municipal, and federal officers were deployed to key roads, airports, and tourist zones. The message was simple. The boss is gone, but the city will not fall into chaos. They knew how fragile those moments could be. Take out a leader, and the vacuum invites revenge. But respond fast enough and you can hold the line. Those first few hours after an arrest decide everything, peace or payback. The dawn raid on La Princesa de Tlahuac. In the quiet hours of March 11, 2019, Mexico City was still half asleep when an operation began to move. There were no sirens, no flashing lights, and no warnings. A convoy of federal agents from the Attorney General's office, backed by the Mexican Navy, rolled through dark streets with a plan built on silence. At exactly the same time, 8 teams hit 8 different addresses spread between the capital and the nearby state of Mexico. Each team had the same order: take the targets alive, gather every piece of evidence, and finish before the city woke up. One of the names on that list was a woman whose nickname had already traveled across the city. Diana Karen Perez Ramirez, better known as La Negra or La Princesa de Tlahuac. She wasn't just another suspect. Her father was Felipe de Jesus Perez Luna, known as El Ojos, the man who once ran the Tlahuac Cartel. When the Navy killed him in a 2017 shootout, the streets of southern Mexico City burned. Buses were set on fire. Roadblocks appeared out of nowhere. It looked for a few hours like the capital itself had cracked. And when the smoke cleared, his crew, family, friends, and lieutenants, tried to keep the business alive. By early March 2019, investigators had been tightening the circle. They'd already caught her brother, Luis Felipe, nicknamed El Felipillo. That arrest made one thing clear: they were coming for the rest. A week later, before the first hint of sunlight, plainclothes agents and Navy support moved in. The focus was Tlahuac. Dense neighborhoods, narrow streets, and houses close enough that a warning shout could jump rooftops. That's why timing mattered so much. By striking all 8 places at once, no one could tip the others off. In one sweep, they caught Deanna Karen, her sister Samantha, and a man known only as Mauricio J. The reports say not a single shot was fired. The agents followed their checklists, documented every room, photographed the evidence, and bagged it cleanly for court. When they laid out what they'd found, it told a clear story. Cars, cash, firearms, radios, phones, packaged drugs, a digital scale. Every single item had its place in the puzzle. The small baggies showed sales. The scale pointed to distribution. The radios and phones proved coordination. The cash showed profit. And the guns tied the operation to violence. That's how prosecutors build a strong case. Not with one spectacular find, but with a collection of ordinary pieces that fit together perfectly. To understand why this arrest mattered, you have to picture what the Tlahuac network was really about. It wasn't giant cargo planes or tons of cocaine hidden in fruit crates. It was local, the everyday street-level business Mexico calls narcomenudeo. That word literally means small drug sales, and it's the heartbeat of most urban cartels. It's about corners, houses, and taxi stands. It's about extorting local shopkeepers and taking a cut from bus drivers just to let them pass. After El Ojos was killed and most of his male lieutenants ended up either dead or in jail, Diana Karen's name began showing up in local reports more often. She wasn't moving tons of cocaine overseas. She was running the day-to-day street market, collecting payments, managing sellers, and keeping money flowing. That's why the March 11th operation didn't target a warehouse. It targeted homes. That morning, federal agents from the Attorney General's office and the Navy had done everything right. They had her in custody, her sister detained, and a long table of evidence ready for court. But the legal system moved slowly. Weeks passed and the investigation stretched on. Somewhere in that process, the case loosened. She was released while the file remained open, free while prosecutors worked to strengthen what they had. That release didn't mean the story was over, it meant the clock started again. The same streets that were raided in 2019 started showing up again in reports through the end of that year. The same houses, the same names, the same pattern. It looked like business had simply gone back to normal and the police knew it. So, on May 17, 2020, 14 months after that first dawn raid, officers came back to Tlahuac. This time, it wasn't the federal units. It was Mexico City's own police force, working side by side with the city prosecutor's office. Their target was once again the same woman who had walked free the year before. The file said she'd gone back to her old role, organizing local sales with help from a man identified as Carlos Alejandro, better known as El Cindy. The operation started before sunrise in Colonia del Mar, one of the neighborhoods that had already become a familiar name in police briefings. Officers moved in quietly, blocked off the street, and entered the property under a new court warrant. By dawn, it was over. 2 suspects were in custody, Deanna Karen Perez Ramirez and El Cindy. Authorities said he handled distribution and violent enforcement for her. That morning, the team followed the same routine as before, careful, slow, and exact. They photographed every room, sealed the evidence, and listed every item by hand. The inventory told the same kind of story as the first. Small baggies of drugs, cash, radios, a digital scale, and a handgun restricted for military use. But this time, they also noted a refined cannabis extract known as wax. Within days, a judge reviewed the file. Both suspects were formally bound over for trial. The charges covered intent to sell narcotics and possession of a restricted use firearm. The judge ordered preventive detention while the investigation continued. She went to the Santa Martha Acatitla Women's Prison, and he was sent to the South Men's Prison. The investigation window was set at 2 months, long enough for prosecutors to finish building their case. To legal observers, those rulings meant 2 things. First, the evidence was strong enough to hold both suspects while the file developed. Second, the way the police handled the searches, properly authorized and documented, had passed the court's first test. After the May 2020 arrests, the pandemic slowed everything down, but the process still moved forward. The judge extended the investigation period, but the ruling didn't change. Coastal crackdown on the cocaine queen. The afternoon sun hit the coast hard, turning the roads around Gibraltar into strips of white heat. On one of those roads, a dark Jeep rolled past without hurry. Miles away, teams from Spain's Guardia Civil were listening in, tracking every turn of the engine and every breath inside. They had been following that Jeep for weeks, waiting for the perfect moment to move. Behind the wheel was Ana Maria Cameno, a woman Spanish papers called La Reina de la Coca, the cocaine queen. By late 2014, investigators believed she had rebuilt her network after an earlier case fell apart. They said she was once again moving close to 100 kilograms of cocaine across Spain by car. The Guardia Civil didn't want a chase or a shootout. They wanted a clean arrest that would last in court. So they built their plan around silence. Bug the Jeep. Follow from Madrid down to the southern coast. Wait until the drugs, the money, and the gun were all in reach at the same time. It had started months earlier near Madrid. On July 31st, one of her associates had been stopped in Valdemorillo driving a red Mercedes with a hidden compartment full of cocaine. Almost 19 kilograms, about 42 pounds. That single stop changed everything. The man belonged to her circle, and the way the car was built told investigators they were dealing with professionals. From that day, every vehicle around her became a moving suspect. One car stood out, a black Jeep Cherokee parked often near Majada Honda, a quiet town west of Madrid. Technicians slipped inside and planted covert microphones. Those tiny mics became gold. People talk freely in a car, even criminals. They joke, they plan, they trust the steel and glass around them. The recordings gave investigators voices, breathing, and code words. Cameno spoke differently there, less guarded, more natural. Through that Jeep, they learned where she would go next. La Línea de la Concepción, the port city sitting across the bay from Gibraltar. By late September, the pieces fit. Cameno and her partner had settled into an apartment in La Línea's Las Lomas del Rey complex. The Jeep was parked right outside. Surveillance teams watched as visitors came and went, carrying bags that looked heavy. The investigators decided this was it, They would hit both targets at once, the apartment and the Jeep. They moved on the night of September 25th. Inside the apartment's main bedroom, officers opened 2 suitcases and froze. Inside were 49 tightly wrapped bricks of cocaine weighing almost 45 kilograms, about 99 pounds. On the same table sat a pistol fitted with a silencer, 28 cell phones, a precision digital scale, and a heavy hydraulic press with metal molds. That press was the tool traffickers used to reform loose cocaine powder into uniform bricks for transport. Almost at the same time, another team pried open the rear panel of the Jeep parked outside. Hidden inside was what Spanish police call a calita, a secret compartment built right into the body of the vehicle. Inside that space, they found 41 more bricks weighing nearly 38 kilograms, about 84 pounds. The car had been turned into a rolling vault. When they laid the seizures together, they had over 83 kilograms, roughly 183 pounds, of cocaine, a silenced pistol, 28 phones, cash, and all the tools of the trade. When they searched Camino herself, they found 8,700 euros in cash hidden under her clothes. When the case reached court, it unfolded just as cleanly as the raid itself. Camino didn't speak. She stayed silent through questions, letting her lawyers talk. But she didn't need to say anything. The microphones and the photos spoke louder. In September 2022, Spain's Audiencia Nacional delivered its verdict. 12 years in prison for drug trafficking, 4 more for money laundering, and a fine of 21.2 million euros. The court dropped the standalone weapons charge. Spain's gun laws are strict about proof of possession. Camino appealed, but in April 2024, Spain's Supreme Court upheld everything. 16 years total. Fine confirmed. The judges called her the director of a structured network and pointed to her lavish lifestyle with no legal income. They listed the cars modified with hidden compartments, the companies used to launder money, and the partners who helped her push cocaine across the country. What convinced them most was the strength of the evidence chain. The synchronized warrants, the tools, the recorded voices, the drugs, and the cash that linked every part together. La Linea isn't just another coastal town. It sits on one of Europe's busiest smuggling corridors, right across from Gibraltar, where shipping lanes from Africa and the Atlantic meet. A firefight there could have been a disaster. Tourists, families, and trucks packed onto the same streets. The Guardia Civil knew that. They wanted control, not chaos. So they built an operation that would end quietly and leave the public out of danger. And it worked. By dawn, everything was over. The Jeep sat empty in a police lot. The apartment was sealed. The 1-minute grab of La Senora. Clara Elena Laborin. Archuleta looked on paper like an ordinary widow from Hermosillo. But in reality, she was the quiet heartbeat of a cartel that refused to die with her husband, Hector El H. Beltran Leiva. The newspapers called her La Senora, a name that carried weight from the beaches of Acapulco to the deserts of Sonora. She ran 2 worlds that rarely touched. One was bright and loud, the resorts and nightclubs of Acapulco, where her people fought for control of every corner that sold drugs. The other was silent and dry, the quiet streets of Hermosillo, far from the chaos where she could plan in peace. That distance kept her alive, but by the end of summer 2016, it gave the federal police exactly what they needed: quiet ground and time to move in. For months, agents in Guerrero had been tightening the circle, arresting small players, seizing phones, and tracing calls. Each low-level arrest revealed a few more names, a few more clues. Mexico's intelligence center, known back then as CISEN, filled in the blanks. The data pointed north. She wasn't hiding behind walls or armed guards. She was living quietly inside Hermosillo's city grid. That simplicity became the plan. The goal was to take her before dawn on a quiet street while the city was still half asleep. Before the sun came up, agents were already in position. The targets were La Senora and the man beside her, Alan El Cha, her money hand, the one who handled the cash, the books, and the transfers. When their car appeared, the agents didn't wait for backup. Two vehicles closed in fast, one blocking the front, another boxing from behind. Plainclothes officers moved first, uniforms followed. There was no shouting, no broken glass, no gunfire. In less than a minute, the car was boxed, the suspects were pulled out, and the street was sealed. On the curb, they began the inventory. 2 kilograms of cocaine, about 4.5 pounds, packaged and ready. Alongside it, restricted-use firearms, the kind civilians are not allowed to carry. Each weapon was cleared, photographed, tagged, and sealed. The cocaine was logged, labeled, and placed into evidence before sunrise. Weeks earlier, agents had already detained a businessman in the port with cartel ties, and El Cha was the link between them. Now both ends of the chain were in custody, tied to the same network. By breakfast, radio stations were already calling it one of the biggest arrests of the year. Federal officials said La Senora had financed the cells responsible for much of Acapulco's violence, paying gunmen, buying weapons, and keeping her late husband's empire alive. She wasn't just a widow. She was the one signing the checks. Even the U.S. Treasury Department had noticed her years earlier, freezing assets tied to her name. In Acapulco, the reaction was instant. Her arrest meant the money stopped. Orders went silent. Rival groups froze, unsure of what would happen next. Within days, La Senora was transferred south to a federal women's prison in Morelos, the kind built for long sentences and high-risk inmates. For investigators, the real prize wasn't the cocaine or the guns, it was the phones. They held months of messages, coded notes, payment lists, and voice memos linking names in Sonora to bloodshed in Acapulco. People in Sonora remembered her differently. They told old stories of beauty contests in Sonora, a rumored kidnapping by rivals, and how she'd once been found tied up near a university with a note pinned to her dress. After something like that, you learn to move quietly, trust few people, and never let your guard down. The garage ambush of La Reina de Ronda. Maria del Mar Mellado Blanco was known as La Reina de Ronda, the Queen of Ronda. The nickname came from her roots in Malaga province near the town of Ronda, where she was known for her charm and confidence. She was the woman quietly steering one of Madrid's most reliable cocaine routes, one that stretched from South America to Spain, then outward across Europe. By the summer of 2022, Spanish police claimed she had built a clean, steady system that worked like a machine. The plan was simple but risky. Send cocaine on regular passenger flights from South America, land it at Madrid Barajas, and move it into the city through human couriers, people called mules, and quick suitcase handoffs. They already knew who she was because they had caught her once before. Back in 2012, she was arrested at Barajas Airport with 2 couriers who had just returned from the Caribbean carrying high-purity cocaine. That arrest made her a known figure inside Spain's anti-narcotics world. The new case began quietly, the way many European drug operations do, with patience. Spain's national police teamed up with Colombia's anti-narcotics unit, DIRAN, to watch a fresh shipment fly in from South America. The plan wasn't to stop it at the airport. They wanted to wait, follow, and catch the handoff. Seeing a courier with cocaine isn't enough. Prosecutors need to prove who controls it. So officers agreed to let the plane land, let the courier pass customs, and then trail her until she met the person at the top. Before the flight even landed, agents had already gone through the passenger list. They built what they call profiles, small checklists of people who matched certain travel patterns like one-way tickets, short stays, or cash payments. One woman drew attention right away. At each checkpoint, she seemed uneasy, her eyes darting, her answers short. Nervous behavior isn't proof of a crime, but it's reason enough to watch longer. Through international channels, Spanish officers pulled her record and found several drug trafficking entries in different Latin American countries. That was enough to tighten the tail from the gate to the curb. Outside Madrid Barajas Airport, she grabbed a taxi and headed toward the center of the city. Surveillance cars followed at a distance. She checked into a small hostel, nothing fancy, just the kind of place where people stay when they don't want to be noticed. Within the hour, a man arrived. He stayed briefly, spoke little, then left. Officers followed him too. He drove a short distance, parked, and texted her an address. It was a quiet residential block, the kind of place where nobody looks twice at a stranger carrying a suitcase. After about an hour, the courier left the hostel with her suitcase and got into another taxi headed straight for the new address. The surveillance team kept a calm distance. In the underground garage beneath that residential complex, everything came together. The woman with the suitcase arrived first. The man from the hostel met her there, and standing nearby, already known to investigators, was Maria del Mar Mellado Blanco, La Reina de Ronda. The officers waited only a few seconds. The moment the suitcase touched the ground and the handoff began, they moved. In one fast push, all 3 people were on the floor, the suitcase was open, and the cocaine was visible. Later, the weight was confirmed at around 11 kilograms, roughly 24 pounds of high-grade cocaine. In one of the parked cars, police also found a hidden compartment. Behind a dashboard panel, they uncovered bundles of cash wrapped in plastic totaling about 23,500 euros. On the seats and in pockets, they found 6 cell phones. Each phone served a different purpose. One for suppliers, one for couriers, one for payments, and others as backups. For a narcotics team, that is a perfect grab. The Queen of Ronda's arrest created a ripple that reached both north and south. In Madrid, rival crews hesitated, unsure whether more arrests were coming. In South America, suppliers had to find new buyers and new carriers. Back in Ronda, people were shocked. Some had known her only as a kind, fashionable woman who helped neighbors and funded small events. Others admitted they had always suspected something more. Police described her as polite but expressionless during the arrest, calm in a way that only someone used to pressure can be. The officers who logged the evidence said she spoke little. asked for her lawyer, and kept her eyes on the suitcase the entire time. By the next morning, she was on her way to pretrial detention. The cash and the drugs were in evidence lockers, the phones were with forensic techs, and the car was on a tow truck headed for inspection.